And because of that dynamic of that relationship with my mom, and I guess for the lack of a better word, that helicopter kind of parent, it created hell in my life in high school. And so it was strange because I'm getting inducted into the Texas High School Hall of Fame at this time in my life for my performance on the football field, but I'm also one of the most bullied kids in school. I actually don't have any friends. I actually, write my first suicide note when I'm 17 years old. I don't want to live because I feel like a square peg trying to fit into a round hole every single day. But on the football field, people worshiping, they love me. So I think the hard part is that this reinforced the narrative that was already instilled in me as a 6-year-old kid. And this reinforced, like, see, if I do reach a performance in life, if I do measure up on the football field, I'll find the acceptance.
Hey guys, welcome to the Rebirth Podcast. I want to thank you guys for watching and for listening. In this podcast, we talk to individuals that have had to reinvent, recreate, and reimagine in order to grow. But before you watch and listen, I want to remind you to subscribe, to like, to review, and to share this episode and this podcast with everyone that you know. Thank you so much and enjoy. Caleb, what's up, my man?
How are you, brother?
Oh, man, it's so good to be on the same episode with you, to have a conversation. Before we start unpacking so much, because there's a lot to unpack, and I love your story. I got to tell the listener real quick how you and I even connected, because I'm a very big believer about timing.
Yeah.
I believe timing is everything. And I've learned that over the course of the last 18 years that, we all get so impatient and we want something in this very moment. And then when it doesn't come to us, we're like, why? Like, and life's not fair and God's not fair and everything's not fair. And then later, the thing you wanted presents itself and you're like, oh,
yes.
And now I'm in a different place in life where this makes sense to connect. So the reason I said that whole thing for the listener real quick. So about 3 years ago, I was traveling and I remember I was listening to some podcast. It's called Terrible Thanks for Asking. And I was listening to some other episode. I don't know why, and I don't know what the episode was about. But as soon as that episode finished, there was another episode that popped up and it said, Caleb Campbell. And I read the details and I was like, okay, I'll listen to this. This seems pretty cool, pretty fascinating to me. So I was like, I'll listen to it. I jump into the podcast. As soon as it's done, I'm like, whoa, this dude's story is incredible. And so then I looked you up on Instagram. I hit the follow button and I was like, I like this dude. He doesn't post a lot on Instagram, but you know what? I like what he does post and I like his story. So now cut to 2020, JR says, like everybody else in the world, I'm going to start a podcast. And so I start a podcast and I start putting together like a wish list of people that I would love to talk to. You're on the list. So I was like, well, I have no other way to hit him up. So I hit you up on Instagram. I sent you a DM and I said, hey, man, introduce myself. Silence. You never responded. But I never took it personal because, again, you're not as active. Back then, you weren't as active on social media. So I didn't take it personal. I was like, he'll check it one day. And I was just like, timing, right? That's kind of what my default now is. The timing's not right. So then January of 2021, my wife and I, we live in Austin. For those of you that don't know, we live in Austin. And so we're going to meet up with some friends. It's a beautiful day in Austin. The weather's incredible. So we meet up with our friends. We're like, let's go to this place. We're going to eat outdoors. It's beautiful. It's great. And we walk into the joint and I see you. And I was like, man, that dude looks familiar. But I sit down and I was like, all right, I don't know, right? Like, who knows? And then you get up to go to the restroom and you look at me and you stop and you like, what? You point at me and you're like, JR Martinez? And I point at you and I'm like, Caleb Campbell? And you're like, yeah. And I'm like, dude, what's up? And so then literally we rapped for, 15 minutes and your wife was there and one of your boys was there. And we started rapping, man. And I told you, I was like, man, I reached out to you. Of course, you felt bad, but I was like, no, I'm not trying to like throw you under the bus. I'm just telling you, I've been a fan of your story and your journey up until this point. I know that it's going to continue to evolve and grow. So it's great now that here we are. I
Yeah.
got you on the
Full
Rebirth podcast,
circle.
man.
That's so cool. Well, I don't even think I've told you this, but just recently, probably in the last 6 months, I've had an increased interest in astrology and understanding
Mm,
astrology when it comes to identifying or having a deeper understanding of purpose in life. I think astrology is an incredible resource that really can help you understand not only who you are, but why you are here. And no joke, JR, that morning when I looked up my astrology, put on this app, it's Chani, and I looked at my basically what was happening in transits for my life. And there was one section that legitimately said, and I told Kara this, and she like started like crying because it's just funny how things work.
yeah.
It literally said, um, be aware of sporadic moments where you like meet people that are coming into your life for a reason. Like basically,
Mm,
people are gonna be coming into your life during this. It was a 2 day transit though, so it was like for these 2 days, people in new relationships were going to be coming into your life. And I was just like, oh, okay, cool. And then I met you literally a few hours later. And I remember as we were leaving
wow.
that restaurant, I opened up the app again and I reread it. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool.
That's crazy. But see, like, again, timing, right? Like
Timing, man.
everything
Yeah.
has its time. And let me tell you, for those of you listening, and you're like, okay, that all right, that's crazy. But I mean, I run into my friends all the time, or I run into people all the time. Caleb does not live in Austin.
No, I was visiting.
He was visiting Austin.
We weren't
He
even supposed to
lived
be
in
at
a,
that restaurant.
yes. They were going to go to another restaurant and then it wasn't open. So then they just drove down the road and then happened to stop in that restaurant. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, and Caleb is going to back this up.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, if there's something in your life right now or something that you've wanted and something that you've been craving and it just hasn't happened, just stick with it.
Mm.
Just stick with it and just keep paying attention to the universe. Pay attention to that astrology app. Pay attention to the signs of life because when the timing is right, that person will be, you will connect with that person or that thing that you want.
Yeah, that's good, man. I'm all for
Well,
that.
listen, there's so much to unpack, right? Like there is so many layers to your story and I know you're still writing the story
Mm.
and but there's so many layers and I connected with you not only on the military aspect of things, right? Your time in the army, but I connected with you as a sports fan, you know, somebody like yourself who played in the NFL. And so I connected on that level as well, but I connected with you on a deeper level. And
Mm.
it goes back to what your childhood, you know, was about and to what you have been evolving through and working through and coming to understanding and coming to just shaping and understanding like how this all this plays out in your life. And so I would love, man, if we can go back to the
Please.
Texas boy that was like the star and literally was kicking ass in every sport, especially football. And let's start unpacking from that point. So
Yeah.
take us back to the panhandle of Texas.
Man, I'm still literally trying to love that little boy. I'm reaching behind me real fast because I found the picture of me, when I was young.
Ah,
Look at that hair.
look at that hair. That's what I
I,
that's what I was gonna say. Look at that hair. That's how I look at every photo of me as a kid. I'm like, look at that hair.
I
And then
know,
look at
right?
the both of us now.
I look at this though because I think your childhood is the source of some of your greatest memories and also some of your deepest pains.
Mm,
Um, and I think so much of our adult life and the healing journey that I feel like all called to enter into, if you want to say yes to experiencing a deeper, more fulfilled way of life, is going back to that childhood and really learning how to reparent yourself. Whether you had great
mm,
parents or not so great parents, whether you had a great family life or a not so great family life, no matter what it is, um, it really is learning how to reparent ourselves and learning how to give ourselves the love that we maybe did not receive as a child. And so I don't know, growing up in the Texas Panhandle, I think I was born with a football in my in the hospital. They just put a football inside of my crib. If they didn't, my mom sure in the hell did. Uh,
yeah.
but I also grew up like in the Bible Belt of Texas, and
Mm,
it's you're growing up with knowing that God has a plan for your life. That I think was it Jeremiah 29:11. um,
mm,
and I think I've always known that there's a deeper purpose for my life, a deeper calling for my life, I guess. And from a young age, I've craved that. Like, what is it? Why am I here? Um, for me, though, I was 6, and I talk about this often when my mom, after I scored a game winning touchdown, um, my mom, I remember grabbing me on the sideline, and she grabbed my red, hot, sweaty face, and she said, "Son, I love you so much. You know, you scored the game-winning touchdown." And it was an innocent moment, and I don't fault my mom for this in any way, obviously. But in my head, I heard, "I'm loved because I scored a touchdown." And so I think what's really prominent and important to understand about my childhood is, at an early age, performance isn't something that I did or didn't do. Performance became the blood that was literally pumping through my veins. It was the way that I found acceptance in this life. It was the way that I found validation. It was the way that I found significance.
Mm,
And so from an early age, I knew that there was a calling on my life, or if you want to say that, I think we all have that calling on our life. I knew that I wanted to do something with my life. I wanted to understand, who am I? Why am I here? And really truly find my, even though I didn't have the language for it at that time, really try to find my unique way of belonging in this world. And I just thought it was the way that I would find that is through performance, doing more, achieving more, being more.
mm. So, again, I think all of us are guilty as parents have for doing that at some point, especially like if especially and I don't want to generalize dads and kind of give dads a bad rep, but I know that dads tend to be a little bit more competitive and tend to be a little bit more involved in the sports element, and so I know that I
My mom.
yeah, yeah, not your mom, right? Well, I think, and again, I think Texas moms are very
Yeah,
different, right? Texas moms are on a whole. I mean, they're like recruiters. I mean, they're recruiters, they're trainers, they're scouts. I mean, they are in a whole other league by themselves. But it makes me think of like when my daughter, when she was 4 years old, we put her in soccer, right? And of course, it was nothing. And I think it was 3 years old we put her in soccer. And the point is like she was in it for a couple of years. Well, then finally she ended up getting we had to register her. We were a little late in registering her. When we finally did, she ended up being on a team that had more boys that were a little bit older than her. So
mm,
now they're in this space where they're doing scrimmages, right? Now again, she's like 5 years old, but she's doing little scrimmages. So me as the dad, very innocently, I just want her to have the best opportunity to succeed and not feel like overwhelmed. I'm trying to like, no, hey, we call her Belle. So I'm like, Belle, like right there. Okay, Belle, get the ball, get the ball. Oh, you almost had it. Like, right, right. In my mind, it wasn't like I need you to be better than all of the other kids out there. I need every parent to know that that's my kid. It was more of, I want to help set you up to
sure.
succeed. But because I was doing that and because she wasn't really necessarily being able to keep up with the boys that are older than her, it turned her off.
Mm,
It completely turned her off to the point where she's like, I'm done with soccer. I'm done. And I feel horrible because I'm like, oh my God, like I think I contributed to that. Like I literally contributed to that, not intentionally, not wanting, trying to push her so much. But I know that because I had this language and this tone that I pushed her to that space.
mm,
And so as a parent, well, I mean, what are your thoughts having gone through that? What do you do? Because there's like this fine line, right? Like,
yeah.
do you say when you grab, little son or daughter's face and you're like, they score the whatever point, instead of saying, I love you so much because you did that, do you say, I'm just proud of, like, what do you say?
I think it's more so, I you know that I love you regardless, whether you score the winning touchdown or not. I just want to know that I'm so proud of you because I know how much hard work you've put into this. So it's
Mm.
correlating the hard work with the effort, with the performance. But regardless of the performance, you're so deeply loved, right?
Regardless of the outcome, I'm
Regardless of
still
the
here.
outcome, you're so still deeply loved. There is no amount of touchdowns that you could score that could actually make me love you more, right? And there's no amount of touchdowns you could not score that would make me love you less. You are so deeply loved. And I think this is where, if I can like kind of have a moment here, this is where
Of course.
Christianity has so deeply missed it. And I'm not, I guess just because I brought up the Bible Belt, and I think so much of my story into where I am today is deconstructing my faith. But we have reduced Christianity into, or we have reduced this idea of Christianity into this performance of morality. when really like the life-changing experience of God in this universe is that we are unconditionally loved and accepted as we are today. There is nothing that I could do in my life that could make God or this universe love me more than it loves me right here, right now. Like,
Mm.
if we can grasp that, if we can truly wrap our heads around that, that is life altering
Yeah.
because it creates such a rest in your life. Think of how much you are doing in your life and the striving and the be more, the achieve more, the pressure that you're putting on yourself, the demands you're putting on yourself, the expectations that you're holding yourself to, those standards. It is draining. It is exhausting, and you're doing it. And not saying this as a blanket statement, but so many of us can do it or will do it because we're not enough right now, that it's not enough right now, or that I have something to prove, right?
Mm.
It is such a drastic difference between waking up every day and knowing that I belong and living from this place of belonging versus waking up every day trying to prove my worth and trying to prove that I'm worthy to belong. That's
Wow.
a
That's
drastically different way of approaching life.
that provides so much freedom, right? Like you
Oh
get
my
so
God.
much freedom from that perspective. And once you embody that, it's like you're able to just genuinely go into every scenario
Yes.
with a person, with multiple people, with whatever life throws at you, and you're able to receive it at its
Mm,
face value.
yeah. It's honestly like we were sitting in this self-imposed like prison cell and we hold the key.
Hmm.
We hold the key. We just have to shift this mindset. We have to see the world differently. Like there's like everything, it's already been given to me. What are you fighting for? So the real work becomes, since we have been raised in the Western culture of performancism, right? And performancism, make no mistake, it drives us in so many ways. And I think it's a healthy driving force behind our lives for a season. But what we don't know how to do is we don't know how to receive. We
Mm.
know how to will our way into existence. We know how to do more, achieve more, be more, and we know how to make our lives happen. But the rest, I think that we're really looking for, and I think a major part of my message in life is how do we actually surrender the willfulness and posture our heart on a seat of humility and willingness to receive what is already coming into our lives. So we go from trying to push the river to actually then being in the river.
Oh, 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 getting poetic on me over here. Poetic. I didn't know you had that side of you,
Oh
boss. All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So let's pick it up from your mother grabbing your little
Yes,
face and telling
please.
you, I
The
love
best.
you because of what you did. Your next, your childhood then continued to be evolved as you started to be a star in high school. And I mean, you're essentially you had the high school career that I think every kid, especially boy that plays football, wants, right? Like
From
I
that,
want to be
from the football standpoint, I don't mean to interrupt you there. I
right,
also,
right.
because of the relationship and the dynamics with my mother. My mother, she's an Italian woman. I love her dearly, but she likes to talk. Um, and she likes to talk loudly sometimes. And she was so involved in my life. And I know looking back at her, she was doing the best that she can. I know, even though now with the understanding that I have in my life, I can look back and say that, oh my gosh, you were living so vicariously through me because you
Mm,
didn't want me to repeat the same mistakes that you might have made. And you were living vicariously through to me and demanding something of me to be something that I might not have never was supposed to be, but
mm,
this is about you. This isn't about me. Um, and because of that dynamic of that relationship with my mom, and I guess for the lack of a better word, that helicopter kind of parent, it created hell in my life in high school. And so it was strange because I'm getting inducted into the Texas High School Hall of Fame at this time in my life, for my performance on the football field, but I'm also one of the most bullied kids in school. I actually don't have any friends. I actually, write my first suicide note when I'm 17 years old.
mm,
I don't want to live because I feel like a square peg trying to fit into a round hole every single day. But on the football field, people worshiping, they loved me. So I think the hard part is that this reinforced the narrative that was already instilled in me as a 6-year-old kid. And this reinforced, like, see, if I do reach a performance in life, if I do measure up on the football field, I'll find the acceptance that I'm looking for.
Mhm.
But off the field, life was a living and utter hell on earth for me through high school. Some of the four of the most more um, harder years of my life, I would say.
Okay, so I want to ask why,
Yeah,
but before I ask that, I know that you told a story. I heard you tell a story about how, being that age and having thoughts of suicide, and you told one of your teammates on the football team,
yeah,
and your teammate was like, "Dude, no, because we got a game this
yeah,
Friday."
yeah,
And I remember when I heard you say that, I paused
mm,
and I had to rewind because I was like, "Did he just say
yeah,
what I thought he said?" And of course, I played it, and of course, I heard, and I was like, "Oh my God." I couldn't even imagine you at that age feeling what you were already feeling and confined in somebody who you felt was one of your friends. And literally, all them telling you is like, "No, don't do that because we need you for this thing." That was it. It wasn't even about you as the person anymore. And
yeah.
that's literally to your point. But why was high school so challenging for you? I mean, why did you get bullied? I mean, you think of like the star
Yeah,
of the
I know,
team.
I know. It was a strange. It was just like in so many ways a paradox, I guess. I was the star of the team, but I, I, I don't. I just for a lot of reasons, it was because I didn't do what everybody else did. I grew up in a family that, I grew up in the church. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I didn't have sex. I didn't do any of these things that, normal high school kids, I guess, were exploring in life. And I didn't necessarily do them because, I just didn't want to do them. I didn't do them because, one, I had the fear of my mom in my life, not the fear of God,
Right,
the fear of my mom. And if I did anything that I think would jeopardize my future, she literally beat the hell out of me.
right, right,
Yeah, it's like, wow. I was talking to a friend not too long ago, and he told me I was telling him about this moment. He's like, Caleb, that's not okay. And like,
right.
oh, what was so normal as a childhood and just discipline your child. Like, no, that was not okay when I'm looking back at that moment. Um, but then there was also the reality of I didn't want to do things that would jeopardize me fulfilling God's plan in my life. And so I think I just got so much hell because everybody thought I was better than everybody else. I spend so much time of my life now speaking in schools, and it really is that still today, like when you have goals and when you have dreams and when you have these desires and you're not going to do the things that what maybe so-called popular kids are doing or what everybody else is doing, people think you're better than everybody else. People start, just saying things about you and rumors, and it just wasn't true. And that's really what it was. I was in the gym almost every single day over 4 years of high school at like 5:30 in the morning. I was the last to leave after practice every single day because I just had these goals in my life. I wanted to do something with my life, and I think that just caught a lot of flack and criticism throughout those high school years.
Wow. And you would think that somebody traditionally, when you see somebody that achieved so many things, on the football field, that you would be inundated with the amount of offers to go to this school and that school. But that wasn't the case for you. Like did you get two offers? Is that what it was? Two offers?
Yeah, I got like a Division 2 offer. I got one other Division 1 offer, and then I got a West Point, the West Point offer. So I got like three offers. It's just weird in the state of Texas when it comes to football. Like I'm at the very tip top of Texas, and you can fly to Dallas, you can fly to Houston, and essentially find all of the talent you need in those areas.
Right.
So there wasn't at that time uh, uh, too many colleges going 6.5 hours north to see one kid when they can find everything
Right.
down south. So yeah, I
Yeah,
got overlooked a lot.
that makes sense. So, and one of the offers that you received was rescinded, right? Like
Yeah,
yeah, right, like right.
jokes on
So
you.
then, so then you're now left with two,
Mm.
and you ended up. Tell me how you ended up making a decision to accept going to West Point.
Yeah, I actually just wrote about this the other day in my journal. I went to West Point, and I on that visit, they do. the most, I don't know what it's like now, but then they do the most amazing things, and you just realize that, like, whoa, this is big. This is bigger than football. You know, you
Right.
feel the weight of that. And I think that really, I think at that time, like reflected back to me or mirrored back to me the deep longing in my life to do something big. Right. I'm like, oh, this is what's going to satisfy that longing. Like this is enough space in the ecosystem that's going to allow me to experience the deeper life that I'm looking to live that I've carried since I was a child. And I think there was a lot of also pressure from my mom. I remember being in a moment where after I had signed to play at West Point, we were back at my hometown before I went to college. And my mom was like, I didn't go on the visit with Caleb because I wanted him to make his own decision. And I remember somebody else being there that day and like basically looking at me, being like, we all damn well know that she made this decision. And I think to a degree she did. I think I own that decision. I'm so glad and thankful that I went to West Point. I would have it no other way. But she
Right.
definitely played a role subconsciously in getting me to say yes because she also knew the immense opportunity that was ahead of me or that was there for me.
Right. So you go to West Point. Now, here's this small town kid from Texas, the panhandle, now going up to New York. And what is it, like an hour north of New York City? And you get to West Point, and of course, the idea was you're going to play football, right?
Yeah.
And you start doing your thing on the field, and all of a sudden there's some like, okay, there's some attention coming Caleb's way. Maybe the attention that he didn't get in high school, but now he's getting at West Point on the football field. To the point where it started catching, and I could be off, and so
Mhm.
definitely correct me here, but it started catching the attention of NFL scouts and individuals in the league, and like, hey, I think we can like draft this kid or whatever. Talk to us about kind of your early days at West Point and then how it ultimately started to slowly evolve into this idea that, ooh, there is a possibility where Caleb can do something that is not necessarily, well, I mean, there's a rule against it, right?
Yeah.
Like you play sports
Not a,
for, I mean,
it's
you can
not
go,
a possibility at that
right.
time.
Like there was no way you can go to the NFL
Yeah.
or be drafted into any professional sport because you have to serve in the military first. You have to do
Mhm.
your time first, then you can go pursue it. But there was starting to be conversation around an exception for you.
Mhm. Yeah, so when I went to West Point, I fully was well aware that there were the childhood dream of playing in the NFL. Even I don't even know if I knew that was like a reality or even like considered that to be a reality. I knew I was going to West Point for something bigger than football, so I kind of dismissed it, if I'm going to be honest with you.
Ah,
It was like, hey, I'm going to go play football because that's my way into the school. But the thing is, to give you better context, you have to understand at this time in my life, I'm the least socially aware, emotionally aware person you've ever met. Um, I think so much I guess I can say it like growing up in the church, there was never any space for me to become emotionally evolved because anytime I was experiencing some sort of uncomfortable emotion, fear, dread, grief, whatever it might be, I was never given the space or the permission to feel what I needed to feel and to learn how to process those emotions in a healthy, an effective way because I was just always, met with, God took care of that. Jesus, died for those, just pray more,
mm,
worship more. And so in a lot of ways, all of that was pent up inside of me. I, at this point, had lived through a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, and it's all been suppressed. It's all been denied. And so
but
when I
you,
got to
but at that point, you didn't know that, right? At that point, you
no,
didn't
no,
quite
no,
know that yet.
no. At that point, it kind of internalized into rage that fueled me on the football field. I remember my sophomore year at West Point, I went to go see a therapist because I was feeling, I guess, depressed. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I was just feeling something. And they said, like, I think, like, have you ever heard, about depression? And I'm like, no. And they say, like, I would love to start you on these pills, this prescription. And my one question to this doctor was, will this take away the rage that I feel on the football field? And he just looked at me with this concerned look, and I didn't understand it at the time, but he was just like, No. But that's all I cared about was like this rage is what fueled me. And I mean, I had rage. And I remember taking those pills and just dumping them into the toilet when I got back to my room and just like, I don't want anything to mess with this rage because it was what lit me on fire. And I say all of that because at West Point, then my freshman year, third year or sixth game into the season, I'm like fourth string, and all of a sudden, one, two, three people down in front of me, and they are all injured, and I got to play. Um, I end up excelling. I don't know. I show up and I have this amazing second half of this game when I had to go into the game, essentially causing a forced fumble that allowed us to win that game, which at that time Army football really sucked. And we had not won a game for like 12 or 13 games. And that was the first game that we won. And so I'm on top of the world. And then my sophomore year comes in and I end up becoming the sixth strong safety in the country. All of Division I football, I'm the number 6 ranked strong safety in the
Wow.
country. But at this time also, the pain that I have suppressed and denied in my life is beginning to surface. West Point was this thumb of pressure, was an ecosystem that essentially put this thumb, metaphorical thumb, on my life that began to rise. All this shit began to rise to the surface. And I didn't know how to handle it. And the only way I did know how to handle it was essentially rage. Like my thought is anytime I felt like I was about to be exposed or seen for somebody that doesn't have what it takes, right? Because the last time I was exposed, the last time that happened to me, like I was deeply wounded. So my thought process of going from high school to West Point is like, nobody's going to see me at my weakness. I'm going to do whatever it takes to fit in and nobody's going to see my weakness. I made that vow to myself. And so whenever I felt like I was about to be exposed or seen as something that was going to trigger that pain that I'm trying to get away from, I would use rage to recontrol my domain. Like from anything short of like beating my chest to yelling at the top of my lungs to putting my hand through the wall, I'm not going to allow you to have the chance of seeing me as somebody that's weak, because the last time I was seen as weak, I was taken advantage of and I was deeply hurt. And so it just through West Point now, you have this guy that is really drastically excelling in sports and football. Sophomore year now, strong safety in one of the top strong safeties in the country, but also just so hurt, so full of pain, doesn't not trust anybody except his few boys that he has, and really is just stepping all over people and not giving a shit about anyone other than himself. But just to go on and to clarify, yeah, my sophomore year was when I was like, oh, the NFL is a reality. And West Point at that time saw it as an incredible opportunity to kind of allow my growth in football, help spur recruiting opportunities to get better recruits in, because we're still a Division I program. And that's when they actually created this new alternative service obligation policy that was essentially going to allow me to play in the NFL if that happens 2 years later. If it was going to happen, they were going to give me that opportunity to play in the NFL and also serve simultaneously.
Man,
I know,
there's
I just
so
said a
much.
lot.
Well, yeah, and again, like when when I listen to your story back then, and when I listen to it, you tell it now. I mean, it just I can't help but feel like you represent so many that play sports and that feel like sports is so much of their identity, and sports gives them validation, acceptance, love. That's where they experience it. And then all of a sudden there's maybe something that all of a sudden triggers that, right? It now starts to surface because, as you
Mhm.
said, it's been oppressed. And and then you can say, well, why can't, I mean, you see it all the time, right? Like in college or in the NFL, and you look at some of these student athletes, and they're incredible athletes, but then they do something off of the field, and you're like, man, why? What's wrong with them? That's what people go to. And it's like, you
Mm.
have no idea what they have been working through or have not worked through because their environment did not enable them to work through it. And yeah, you can only play football so many minutes and hours
Mhm.
a day, a week, right? Like, I mean, it's a very physical game. You can't do it every day. So that distraction is not always there. And
Yeah.
then when that distraction is taken away, well, then what's the thing going to be now, right? And so that's, and to your point, That's
Yeah.
when everything else started to surface. So now the military is they're getting this attention. Now West Point's like on the map, and they're getting a lot of love and feedback related to, oh my God, Caleb, is the number 6 safety in the country right now. And our program is being elevated. Oh, there's a possibility he can get drafted. Let's make this exception. And so
Mhm.
then you ended up getting put up for the draft. Was it 2008? Is that right?
2008. Yeah. Yeah.
2008. In the 7th round, what pick were you?
218, I think.
You got to
I
play
think
that number in the lotto. You got to do something with
I
218, right?
do. I know. I still have somewhere in my boxes, I still have my official NFL draft pick card.
Come
So it
on,
says
that's
zero
cool.
lines on it. And it was cool. It was such a cool experience. And I think this is important because ESPN has done a lot of, like, I was on E60 with Rachel Nichols when she was at ESPN. They did this whole primetime featured E60 story on me, which actually created a lot of flack for me because we are in a time of war now, and my classmates are going off to war, and I'm reporting for training camp. Um,
Oh, that's interesting.
and so a lot of people
Did you
either
say flack from teammates and people at the
from
academy, you yourself, or society?
both. Some of my classmates, some of my teammates, it was all unspoken, but you could feel the tension. Um, and then mostly from just people in the country, just people just watching the story and being like, "Wait, no, he's a West Point graduate. Like this isn't what he signed up for." I'm still at this point, 20 or maybe 21-year-old. You have 21-year-old kid now that's sitting at a table. And JR, no joke, I'm sitting at tables with, a 2-star general, 2 1-star generals, 6 full bird colonels, a couple lieutenant colonels, the dean of West Point, the commandant of West Point, and they're telling me exactly what I should be doing. So
Wow.
I'm like getting pulled in 2 different directions where I have a lot of support from West Point because they want to see me succeed because they know the opportunities that this could open up, but also at the same time I have all this pushback and
Mm,
resistance from people's perception, and so I'm
mm.
kind of torn in between two places at this moment. And I get drafted, and I at this time I have 2 cell phones. My agent got me a cell phone, and I have my own cell phone. And both of my phones, because I'm on national TV, I'm at the NFL draft. They feature me in Radio City
So you're in
Music
New
Hall.
York. You're in New York at Radio City Music Hall.
They bring me to the actual draft, and I'm sitting there all day, like, oh, this is embarrassing. Like, if I don't get picked, like, okay. And I end up getting selected. And I remember going home that night, my phone, right? Both of my phone freeze because they lose space with the amount
Wow.
of calls and texts and all these things. And I'm sitting there thinking in my life, like, where have you all been my entire life?
Mm,
Like, now you show up, like, and I'm mixed emotions because I'm angry, but yet I love the acceptance that I'm feeling. I love the validation that I feel. And I just remember though that night, man, I got back to West Point. My boys, they were there waiting with pizza because that's really the only way you could celebrate at West Point.
yeah. What else could you
And
get?
so we kind of like, celebrate, and it's cool and it's great. And I'm at this time feeling this increased sensation and pressure mount up in me. And I tell my boys I'm going to go back home and go to bed. And that night, JR, was my first panic attack
Mm,
where I had this really like this deep and brazen awareness that I've reached the top. Now look how far I can fall. And I
wow.
was so afraid that, oh my God, if I don't make it, everybody's watching me now. I have all of this publicity. Everybody's looking. If you're either rooting for me or you hate me, whatever, everybody's watching to see how I do. Oh my God, if I don't make it, what are they going to say then?
Mm. Yeah, because you'd finally got the thing that you've
Yeah.
desired and looked for your whole life. And the idea of losing that, if
Mm,
you didn't live up to the expectation now everybody was putting on you again, then now it's like you're drafted. Now you got to excel at the
yeah.
next level, at the ultimate level. And the idea of you potentially losing all of the text messages and calls that were coming into both cellies, was I'm sure was like, oh my God, like I can literally just fall that much further down than where I was before I
Yes.
even got drafted. So you get drafted, you show up to training camp, you do you're doing your thing, and then here comes life, and here comes the military.
Real fast.
Let's slow this down real quick. Oh, hey, Caleb, you come off the field real quick. We're gonna need you to head back to West Point.
That's literally what happened. I'm getting ready to wake up that morning and sign my first NFL contract. And I get a call from my agent, and my agent says essentially, I need you to get to the facility immediately. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes on to say, something's happening and we just need to discuss it. I'm like, something's happening. Like, I'm getting cut already. Like, I didn't even sign my contract yet. Um, and I get there, and they're inside of the meeting room is the owner, the head coach, the assistant head coach, like everybody that's important in this organization is sitting there waiting for me. And then there's this black phone in the middle table. And then I walk in and they say, "Hey, Caleb, have a seat." And as soon as I had a seat, I heard the person on the other side of the phone, and it was the athletic director for West Point. And I knew him. I knew his voice well because he was walking with me step by step through this whole process. And he says, "Caleb, I regret to inform you that the policy that the United States, Department of Defense put into motion has been rescinded, effective immediately. You cannot." Sign your contract today, and you are actually have to report back to active duty immediately. And I said, okay, like, in my head, because I still don't know how to be upset. I still don't know how to process emotions healthy. And I remember being like, well, okay, I'll do what any other soldier would do. And I would just drive on. And I remember having that cognitive thought.
Mm.
But here's what people don't know, because at that time, ESPN showed up immediately. Rachel Nichols was there. Um, my story became the training wide, the NFL wide training camp story. Now, suddenly, 7th round draft pick, feel good story of the NFL draft, second person in the history of West Point really to get drafted, and one of the first people to ever really allow to forfeit their service to go play in the NFL, is now being called back to active duty. And so it caught the waves. It
Yeah.
caught everybody. I was so fucking relieved. Can I say that? I'm sorry. I was
Yeah.
so relieved that I just had my chance of playing in the NFL taken away from me. I was
Because of the pressure.
ecstatic that it happened, because to me, I just got a get out of jail free card. To me, I just got the attention of the
Ah.
United States sports world, and all of whether your thoughts were good or your thoughts were not good. I got all of your attention, and I felt the love and the acceptance from it. I felt the importance, the significance of it. And
Mm.
I also didn't have to jeopardize not being good enough. I didn't have to jeopardize being exposed and seen as somebody that doesn't have what it takes.
Oh man, that's crazy. That's crazy. So I mean, anybody else would probably be just like livid, and you're kind of like, okay, I'm cool with it, because maybe a few practices in, I'm realizing the pace is very different. It's a different skill
Yeah.
level. It's taking me a second. Okay, cool. I'm out of here. So you go back to West Point,
Yeah.
which I mean, listen, I have my own feelings about that, and I'm like, man, that's messed up, right? Like that's messed up, right? Like but that's sometimes how I feel. As much as I love my time in the military and I wouldn't change anything, and I think it's a great opportunity for a lot of people. That's the part of it sometimes that puts a little sour taste in my mouth, where I'm like, they'll use you real quick to
Mm.
build up recruitment and attention when you were doing what you needed to do for them on the football field. But the minute that it comes to well, no, we're going to actually take that opportunity away from you. Come back and,
Yeah.
be a soldier, which is, hey, in itself is an incredible thing, right? So you go back to West Point, but then all of a sudden now, if I'm not mistaken, all of these oppressed emotions and feelings now start to surface even more.
Yeah, they start to surface more. I'm still this guy that's trying to hold on to his rage because it's been the driving force behind my life. Like, it's what motivates me and empowers me and makes me go forward. And at this time, they basically say, like, you have to come and serve for almost 3 years, and we rewrote the policy. And after 2.5 years, you can apply for an early release if you still can get an NFL contract. So in my head, I have to like wait 2.5 years, and I still need to be on top of my game and good enough to maybe get another chance at playing in the NFL.
Right.
And so in my head, though, I knew that I could not show back up to the NFL the way that I showed up initially, because like you had said, the reason why I was so excited is because I was getting my ass kicked on the field. And I knew that I didn't have what it takes to actually make it in the NFL. So when they took that away, I was ecstatic, like I said.
Mm.
But in my head, I tell myself in these 3 years, I'm going to get the biggest, the strongest, and the fastest I have ever been, so that I make sure that as soon as I step onto that field, because that's the only way I know how to make myself better, is
Mm.
this willpower, right? This strength, brute strength, like force. So the moment I step back on that field, I'm ready to go. And that's
Mm.
what I did, bro. For the next 2.5 years, I am a machine. I am literally looking like Captain America out there.
Yeah.
I am the biggest, the fastest, and the strongest that I have ever been. And I did what was required of me inside of the military. I went through all of the schooling and all of the things that I had to do as well. So I had to balance a couple of things, but it was also at this time where I was now getting even more pressure and more of a maybe an adverse response from people that I was being able to get out of my military assignment early to go back to the NFL. I remember waking up one day and I would get fan letters. People asking me to sign my trading card because I had a card deal. And people would say like, "Hey, you inspire me. You inspire me. Like, can you sign this? Can you do this? Can you do this?" And it was cool. Like, I had some troops from a fob in Afghanistan send me like one of the or Iraq and send me like a flag that they planted at that fob, like that was really symbolic for like, hey, the United States of America is here, and they sent me that flag.
Oh, wow.
Still have it today, so I have like all these cool memorabilia and like things that really represent people's support for me. But I also got some things that weren't really good.
Right.
And I say that because I actually brought it up. I opened up a letter and I expected it to be um, just some like, fan mail. And this
Yeah.
is what it does. In this, can I read this? Are you
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, of course.
In the enclosed article, I've highlighted a statement that you made, which I find appalling and an insult to the fighting men and women of this country and their families. Comparing the pressures and stress in the NFL to that of fighting of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan is proof that you are a moron and have been protected and coddled your 4 years at West Point, as all core athletes are. The parents and families of brave soldiers fighting these two wars have more pressure and stress than you will ever have. They go to bed at night hoping the phone doesn't ring, informing them that their soldier has been wounded. They also fear that a car with a government place will someday pull into their driveway and an army officer and chaplain get out to inform them that their son or daughter has been killed in action. I can speak from my experience because my wife and I have a son that we are very proud of, who is a first lieutenant with the 101st Airborne and has been fighting in Iraq since September. The Humvee that the lieutenant was in drove over an IED and it exploded. The Humvee flipped in the air and landed. The lieutenant strapped basically goes on to say that their son was killed in action. 2 days later, they had to give him eulogy at his memorial service. And he says, "You will never reach the level of pressure or stress in the NFL or the Army because you'll be sitting in the recruiting office in Detroit area." That's a laugh, trying to convince young and women to join the Army and fight the wars you cowardly avoid. You're a coward. How's that going to work? What did you ever do? Do you tell them the truth that you were a coward and will never experience bravery? By the way, your story isn't playing well with the officers and the enlisted soldiers in the 101st. Even West Point grads over there are pissed. And it goes on to say, "You also wore a C on your uniform. I always thought that stood for captain, but in your case, it's appropriate, coward, or cut and run." Last thing he says, "Before you graduate next week, I want you to muster up the balls to walk over to the West Point Cemetery and stand in front of each headstone of recent graduates who were killed in Iraq or Afghanistan and tell them that you're going to face just as much pressure as they did. I doubt you'll do that. You'll kiss them off like you're kissing off your classmates." I'm enclosing a photo of Pat Tillman. I'm sure you know his story. Take a close look at the photo and listen. You hear that? He's calling you a coward.
God.
And I just read this and
Wait,
I
did you have the physical letter? Is that the physical letter, or do you have it on
No,
your phone?
I have it. I wrote this down and because I know it's like a part of my book, because it was just a moment for me. Like, people don't know I did what I thought was the best thing to do. Like, I did what I was encouraged to do by 3-star generals. Like, you tell me other 21-year-old kids that are getting personal phone calls from 3-star generals telling them the decisions that he should make.
Yeah.
Like, I did all of the things that I thought I should do to the best of my ability while honoring like I don't know, like I just did what I thought I could do and to the best of my ability. But this, I think, drove a knell of shame into my heart. Um, and suddenly getting back to the NFL wasn't about me necessarily fulfilling a childhood dream. It was about me doing my part in like, I didn't go to war, so I better do damn well good in the NFL because this is me making up for it. This is me
Mhm.
representing people. This is so I had this extra pressure, and now the shame at that time, even though I wasn't a parent of it, was beginning to suffocate me.
Mm. Man, that you know, where you are today in life, though, when you read that, do you read that and say, because all right, let me, I guess, when I hear you, when I heard you read that, my mind goes to, that is a man and a family that has rightfully so been deeply
Sure.
wounded because of
Yes.
the loss of their child, and unfortunately, they're just taking it out on you, right?
Mhm.
Are you in that place where you see that letter as
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
for sure. Now I can look back at
But
that.
then,
No.
yeah,
Again, I, at this point, have no emotional tools in my tool belt to help me process the feelings that I'm feeling. I don't even know what I'm feeling. I can't identify what I'm feeling. I have zero self awareness at this time in my life. All I know is I have this incredible amount of pressure that I have just placed in my life to do something special and big with my life inside of the NFL. And I had just worked 3 years to make sure that I was the biggest, strongest, and fastest I've ever been, so that when the time came, if I did get the opportunity to step on that field again, I was going to be ready. And sure enough, I got that opportunity to step on that field. And I still remember the day that I did. I literally stepped on that field for my first NFL training camp practice and ran around the building to vomit because I knew that there was no amount of strength, speed, force, brute willpower that would prepare me for the emotional chaos that I was feeling.
mm.
I couldn't perform my way out of what I was experiencing. And that's when I first realized that truthfully I'm fucked.
And who, what team was that with?
I was back with Detroit.
Back with
So I went back
okay.
to Detroit, yeah. And my time in the NFL was weird. I tell people, and this is how screwed up my head was. I wanted to be good enough to be on the NFL team. I wanted to be good enough. I didn't care if it was practice squad. I didn't care if it was third string. I just wanted to be good enough so that I could say that I played in the NFL, because when you
Yeah.
go out and you're in the NFL, like, life is good. I'm not going to lie. Like,
Yeah,
it's
of
fun.
course.
Like, you get catered to, you experience things that otherwise you just wouldn't experience. And I love the adoration and the acceptance and the significance that came with it. But I didn't want to be good enough to play on Sundays. I actually did not want to play on Sundays
Mm.
because, once again, if I played on Sundays and I didn't measure up
You
and I
were
was
exposed.
exposed, what does that say about me then? And that's the question that I have been running from my entire life,
Mm.
because my entire life has been one big performance after another, after another, after another. And so what happened to me, and I'm not giving you the chance to ask the question, but in the NFL, what really happened to me is I began to really live in the self hatred that comes when I know I should be doing something different, but I'm just too scared to. I know that I should give it my all. I know that I should be studying my playbook instead of going out to the bars. I know I should be, trying to excel more than I am, but I'm so incredibly afraid because I don't want to be seen as somebody that doesn't have what it takes. And I know that I'm a coward to face that question. And
Mhm.
I begin to hate myself.
Mhm.
And in the midst of that self hatred, I'm so afraid that I can't find the courage to walk away and to go live out this question in my life because I know I'm done. I know that and I'm so afraid that I begin to hate myself in such a way that I begin to self destruct in a way where I want to get in trouble. Drugs, I'm showing up to practice high as a kite because I
Wow.
want to get in trouble so that I'm forced to walk away. Right, and I
Wow.
self-destruct, and I never really get caught, I never really get in trouble, and I wake up one day and I realize that if this cycle of life continues, it's only a matter of time before my parents, get a phone call letting them know that I'm no longer with them because I'm literally actively trying to kill myself.
God. Man, that is so powerful because and when you also read that letter, um it's we see this all the time in sports, right? You got fans that are fans of colleges or pro teams, and as fans, you look at the athlete from a distance, right? And it's always from a distance because none of us all have day-to-day interactions with them. And we just like, how can you, say this, or how can you act like this? And how can you, and we're so judgmental to these literally kids, like they're kids when they're put in the positions that they're put, and you're put in all this responsibility. And it's so easy to judge without knowing what Caleb and why Caleb is doing what he's doing, why Caleb says what he says, why Caleb, you have no idea what Caleb is dealing with. And that applies to, I think, almost every athlete that has gone through the ranks of college and going into professional sports. And then they do something, and it's easy for every person to, I think of, for example, Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon is a receiver, incredible. I mean, this dude, physically is he's like a mold, right?
Yeah.
He's like a mold. He's a
Yeah.
beast, incredible talent, but he just hasn't been able to stay on the field because of all the off the field stuff. And everyone's like, "Oh my God, he's screwing! He's throwing away this," and it's like, has anybody stopped once? And there have
Mhm.
been a few people just stopped and really thought about what this young man is dealing with that is off the field, that nothing on the field can fix that and replace. Everybody
Yeah.
wants to ignore it, and he's essentially, in many ways, like you were, is looking for this thing to deal with this because he's never been given the tools, which I believe is one of the most deficient things that we suffer from in this country is emotional intelligence, right? To be able to understand your own emotions, other people's emotions, how to process that, how to apply it to future situation. You didn't have that because it was always like, just hand it off to the higher power, and the higher power will take care of it, but you have to do no work except just continue to go on the field. So now we fast forward your NFL career. You finally decide, after you tried out for a couple other teams and it didn't work out, you decide, this is it. I'm done. So you retire, and I believe this was a big turning point for you because you told your mother, "I'm retiring from the NFL," and she said,
Yeah, I called my mom and I said, "Mom, I got cut. My agent told me there's some offers. I can go and try out and get on the practice squad for some other teams, and I think I'm done." And my mom responded and she says, "Well, what am I going to do now, son?" And I was just remembering that moment being like, angry because I'm like, where the hell is my mom?
right,
And also feeling like this intense pressure that because I owed my mom something, because she invested all of her time and effort into me. And at this time, that relationship is so damn codependent. I mean, I don't have boundaries yet in place because I don't have the language or the tools or the resources and understanding of how to do that. I just say, mom, I'll take care of us. I'll figure it out. I'll take care of us. And so still living with this intense pressure to do something with my life, um, it, that's what spurred me into the next season of life.
wow. So you go back, you retire from the NFL, you go back to Texas, and you're just kind of going through the motions, trying to figure it out, piece it all together, and then there's this sign that comes to you about a church in Canada, and you're like, "I'm going to go to this church in Canada because they were saying everything that I'm experiencing and feeling,"
Yeah,
and so you hit them up. You end up going to Canada. You ended up being like a custodian, right? Like you're cleaning the
yeah,
church,
yeah.
sleeping in the
Basement floor.
yeah, and then you're there for a few years.
7,
How many?
7.
Wow. So you're there for 7 years. What did you is was that the moment and the space where you discovered what you currently know now, or was it almost like this, just barely the seed, and then when you left there and you went to LA, you started to understand a lot more?
Yeah, I think when I look back on my life, I wholeheartedly believe that all of us are being led, we're being guided into a deeper, more fulfilled, more satisfying, more alive kind of experience here on earth. And I think that's what we all are truly looking for. And I would say that Canada was the first time where I literally say this is the definition of the grace of God because again, I don't have any self-awareness in my life. And I also have, because when you leave West Point, you can, and you played West Point football, there's an Army football distro out there. And basically anybody who's ever played Army football, and no matter who they are or where they're at in corporate America, your resume goes out to all these football players and you're taken care of. We take care of
Mm.
our own. I had some amazing job opportunities just drop into my lap that I had no business entertaining. And it was great. But I knew that unless I actually went and got to the bottom of what was happening into my life in the NFL. And this is like what I'm so thankful that this is maybe, I guess, innate in me, but there was there was a tremendous thirst for change in my life because I knew corporate America, getting another job and rising the ladders of success in that corporate field, whatever it might be, was just another NFL.
Mm.
And at some point, I'm going to get to this level where I'm going to reach an environment where I don't feel superior or good enough, and I'm going to begin to self-destruct once again. So I needed to get to the root of what was really happening in my life. And that's when I saw, like you said, a series of tweets on Twitter, and I was drunk as hell. And it was really the first time in my life where somebody put the language what I was feeling. And I was like, who are these people? What do they do? I need to go visit them. I went and I visited. I essentially walked in and I said, can you help me? I need help. And the pastor looked at me and says, yeah, we can help. And so like, I went basically became a glorified janitor of a church. And that's when I really started to do like somatic trauma focused healing.
Mm.
Really learning how to get back into my body, get to the root and build resilience around the shame that was the driving force behind my life that was keeping me stuck and miserable in life. And so that environment, I think that ecosystem, while it caused its own set of problems that I would have to work through down the road, it also at that time created what I would say maybe for the first time in my life, a safe ecosystem
Mm.
where I had for so long in my life in fight or flight, right? And now suddenly I feel this safeness where I can start really shedding the metaphorical layers of my heart one by one and allowing myself to be seen, maybe for the first time in my life, because for the second time in my life, because the last time I allowed myself to be seen in high school, I was deeply wounded.
Mhm.
And so now I feel safe enough to allow myself to be seen. And speaks volumes to the power of community, right? There is no healing without vulnerability. There is no vulnerability without community. Our
Mm.
deepest desire, our greatest reward is allowing ourselves, or our deepest fear, but yet our greatest reward is allowing ourselves to be seen.
Mm.
And that's what really happened in that season of my life. And I begin to build the emotional awareness and the toolbox and the understanding of not only why I'm doing what I'm doing, but understanding the motive behind why I'm doing, just kind of understanding myself to a greater degree. And I'm forever thankful for those people, for that community, for that environment that really changed the trajectory of my life.
Mm. You know, you said something to me, and when one of our first conversations after we met, um, that was so powerful because I connected with you, like I said earlier at the beginning. I connected with you as someone who played football, loves the game. I connected with you as somebody obviously who served in the military. But I connected with you on a deeper level, more so because of your relationship with your mother and
Mhm.
the challenges you faced. And I faced those same challenges then, and I still face them today. And you said something to me that was so powerful, and it just really stuck with me, that, your relationship with your mother, as you started to discover, as you said early on, that she was living vicariously through you, and that you were so much of her identity, and that's why she put so much pressure on you to excel, because it was going to validate her and give her acceptance, and give her everything that she was looking for in life, which was essentially the same thing you were looking for, right? And then when you decided, I'm not going to focus on trying to necessarily validate you, I'm going to try to validate me, and you start to kind of build that community and find that space where you to do that, of course, now there's friction between the two of you,
Yeah.
because now you're not feeding what she needs and desires. And so you talked about your challenges with your relationship with her, but how in your contacts for your mother, the picture that you have in the context for her contact is her as a little girl.
Mhm.
I'd love to hear you, tell the listeners right now why you did that, because it's so beautiful and such a powerful thing.
Yeah, I think it's hard whenever you begin to experience freedom in your life. Our natural instinct is like, it feels so good. Like there's that scripture, right? Like taste and see that God is good, right? Like once you taste, like you have to taste first before you can see. Like if you taste the goodness, it's like, I want everybody to feel this. And so I started really tasting the goodness of healing. And I knew my mom was deeply wounded. And so I just want everybody to experience the goodness that I'm feeling, right? And I'm trying to get my mom help. I'm trying to get my mom to like dive into her story and all this stuff. And at this time, I don't really. I know that my life is changing, but I'm still trying to find the words on how to communicate how my life is changing. And my mom was just so like kind of just confused on like, why are you living? You're a West Point graduate. Like, why are you living in the basement of a church? And essentially a glorified janitor. Like, what are you doing with your life? And she just couldn't really understand that. And it created so much frustration. And we would get in these knocked down, just dragged out yelling matches on the phone with one another. And I started to realize that, you know what? I, if I want something to change, I am going to have to change inside of the context of this relationship. Like, I'm going to have to be willing to see something differently. I can no longer take responsibility for what she does or what she doesn't do. I wipe myself clean of that. And the only way that I found myself to be able to hold space for her and allow myself to like just deal with some of the nonsense that she would be pushing forward in some of these phone calls is I found a 6-year-old a photo of my mom as just a little girl, and I put that photo as her contact in my iPhone so that whenever she called, this photo of a 6-year-old girl would come up. And I knew that as I was talking to my adult mom, what I actually was talking to was that little deeply wounded 6-year-old girl that was still very much alive inside of her and still
Mm.
calling the shots in her life.
That's so good, man. I think that is something that is so many people listening right now. You have somebody in your life. There's somebody in your life that you feel this way towards, and if you can just remind yourself of them prior to when the trauma started to begin and started to shape them, good, bad, and different. If you can just remember them prior, to all of that, then you're able to, right, be able to set up a little boundaries and come a little bit more compassionate and understanding. Doesn't mean you have to accept everything anymore. It just means that you understand why and where they're coming from in many ways.
I
How
often say that like how much oh sorry, I just often say like well, how much life would be different if we walked around life and our deepest, darkest secret was above our head?
Mm,
Like that we just walked around and we could see the deepest pain that people have experienced. Like, how would that change the nature of our conversations with one another or our
yeah,
interactions with one another? Like, it would greatly change it. Even you, like talking earlier about how we judge these people on the field, right? And like for their self destructing. Like, I'm a strong believer that you're not judging them, they're actually a mirror back to you. And you're
mm,
still judging yourself in life and you're still mad at yourself, but you found somebody to be an scapegoat,
mm,
right? Like, just this awareness would change. Like, once you are aware of that, suddenly you're not judging for that person, what he is doing on or off the field. You have this amazing self awareness because you're willing to see that same despair, that same pain, that same brokenness that's inevitably happening inside of you and every single one of us.
right, right. How, I'd like to, I think it's for anybody listening right now, I think it's important to touch on, you after doing a lot of work, since that day of telling your mother that you're retiring from the NFL. You're now in a place where you have a beautiful wife, and you guys recently moved to Nashville, and but I know that for you to obtain that relationship wasn't easy, because I
Mhm.
experienced my relationship with my mother. A lot of the challenges there were bleeding into every relationship that I had, whether
Yeah.
it was with my wife, whether it was with my daughter, whether it was with my best friend, whether it was with other people that I came in contact with. How much work went into it for you to be able to get to this place to say, hey, what I'm bringing into this relationship with my now wife, whom I love very much, I have to be able to kind of leave it at the door at some place. But then also, before I get to that door, before we step through that door as a couple and start our own, new life together, I have to be willing to share with her, what where I'm coming from and what has transpired in my life and what are the challenges, so she understands. So when I say to her, hey, I'm going to leave it at the door, she's not saying, well, no, bring it with you. Like, she understands he needs to leave that there. And that's healthy for him and that's healthy for us. I mean, what was that process like for you to be able to go to that place in order to be able to have this healthy relationship that you now have with your wife?
Yeah, I think it starts with you saying yes to your own journey and going on your own inner healing journey of just understanding the deeper intricacies of what makes you you. Like, I think that's so important. And I think what has helped me in the confines of my relationship specifically is that Kara trusts me because she has seen me show up and do the work,
Mm.
right? He has seen me show up and do the work from time and time again. So when I say, honey, this is what's going on, and she doesn't necessarily register with it or it doesn't make sense to her, she says, I would love to have a conversation about this so I can better understand the direction or the, you know, where you're coming from, but I trust you. I trust that you're showing up and doing the work, right? Because I have done that time and time again. And so I think that just, she gives me the space to do the things that I feel are the right things for me personally, and essentially also for us at times, even when it doesn't make sense, because I have put money in the bank, so to say, when it comes to doing the work. Like, I'm not just reacting emotionally and this is my decision. Like, I have processed this, I have talked about this, I have worked through this, whatever this might be. And I think that, if that makes sense, I think that's just been a really big moment for us, is that when you show up and do the work, you are creating this credibility inside of a relationship, and it actually begins to build this trust from your partner that, oh my God, we're in the thick of it, but I know he's going to continue or she's going to continue to show up and do the work, and I trust that everything's going to be okay.
It's beautiful, man. Dude, I'm so glad that, the universe said, hey, JR, go to this restaurant on this beautiful sunny day in Austin. And that the universe said to you, to your wife, and to your friend, hey, let's go to this place. I mean, yeah, they're open, right? And it looks kind of cool outside, a little Italian joint. Like, let's go check it out. I'm
Pizza
so
was good.
glad. It was, no, the pizza's like is on point.
Dope.
So we have been there a couple times, like since since you and I ran into each other there, and to the point where we started discovering like all these other pizzas that they had. And it's a problem now. It's a problem. Like, they have one pizza that they put potato on, and I would never think in my wildest dreams to put like literally like a chunk of potato on a pizza.
It's so good.
Dog, when you and Kara have a moment, come back.
We will.
Potato pizza on me, and it will blow your mind. And you guys will literally be going back to Austin Airport, eating potato pizza on a plane as you're flying back to Nashville. Trust me. It'll change your life. But yeah, I'm so glad, man, that we were able to connect. And I know that there's, so much more, that you're working on right now. I know you have a podcast. I want to give people the opportunity to learn where they can connect with you and learn about your journey and what you're doing right now. So please share.
Yeah. So I do, like you said, have a podcast called Finding Your Way with Caleb. And it really just, I think I'm trying to create that space for people to just learn a little bit more about the journey ahead for them when you say yes to the call on your life, to that little nudge that I think we all get from time to time, that's saying, hey, do you want to step into a deeper, more expansive way of doing life? And the hard part is that is not the way that we step into that life, is not the way that we are really groomed to step into that life, because stepping into that life isn't a performance, it's a surrender. And there is an art to surrendering. There is an art to letting go. There is an art to creating the space to grieve what needs to be grieved, so that you can invite in then what is meant for you. And so I think a lot of the work that I do is just try to help people navigate that liminal space that comes when the old no longer works for me, but the new has not yet emerged, or the new has not yet appeared, and I'm in this kind of no man's land, right? That's scary to be. So a lot of what I do, the podcast Finding Your Way, I also have a newsletter that I send out every Sunday that just is encouraging you on this journey. You can find that actually in the link in my bio on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is just Caleb_Campbell.
Caleb_Campbell. So we'll obviously have, we'll ping him in the show notes. So be sure to check it out, make it easy for you guys. In case you forget, you don't have to go back and replay this. We'll have everything linked in the show notes for you to be able to connect with Caleb and learn about his journey, and learn about him and his wife and what they're doing and life in Nashville now. Man, just thank you so much for your willingness to be vulnerable. Thank you so much for, I know that this is a challenge. I know it took me a long time to get to this place where I started to kind of slowly started to open up about my challenges, not only about what I experienced in Iraq, but how they're deeply connected and rooted into my relationship with my mother as a child. And so I just appreciate you, finding your own way. And I appreciate you, guiding us all so we can kind of understand that there is a way as well. And we're finding that through you and your story. So I appreciate you, boss. Thank you so much for making the time to come on the Rebirth podcast, man. Like, you definitely are, you exemplify what this podcast is all about, is of reinventing yourself and finding that purpose and what it is that you're doing. And so you got a homie for life. And let me know when the astrology says that potato pizza is in the near future.
Done. I think I'll just screw the stars. How come?
All right, Caleb, man, you take care, man. We'll talk soon, brother.
Yeah. Bless you, brother.
Come on. Aren't you happy that Caleb and I ran into each other? I know I am. It was crazy how we connected, but nonetheless, the universe has its timing and the universe has its way, and we just gotta trust it. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, but I want to remind you to please be sure to share and subscribe and follow me at I am JR Martinez on Instagram to learn more about these amazing guests that I have on the show and me. Until next time, this is Rebirth.